Good morning, dear children. Welcome back. I am Mrs. Sithara, your social science teacher. In today's session, we will discuss Class 7, Term 3, Unit 2 in History, Art and Architecture of Tamilnadu. This is Part 1 of the video series. Come children, let us learn. Dears, before going into today's session, let us see what are we going to learn in this unit. We will try to understand the evolution of temple architecture in South India. We will try to gain knowledge about the cultural heritage of Tamils. Also to know about the contributions of Pallavas, Cholas, Vijayanagara and Nayak rulers to the development of temple art in Tamilnadu. Dear children, the Dravidian architecture is of indigenous origin. Indigenous, I-N-D-I-G-E-N-O-U-S. Indigenous means native or originating or occurring naturally in a particular place. So the Dravidian architecture is of indigenous origin. It originated in South India. It advanced over time by a process of evolution. There was an evolution, there was a change in the style of Dravidian architecture. The earliest examples of Tamil Dravidian architecture tradition were the 7th century rock-cut shrines at Mahabalipuram. You can find the rock-cut temples at Mahabalipuram belonging to 7th century. Now you will be wondering, how come only from 7th century we had monuments? That is because the absence of monuments in South India prior to the 7th century is attributed by the scholars to temples or to have been built in wood. So the temples were built before 7th century also, but they were made of wood, which were eventually destroyed by the forces of nature. The temples which are built on wood could not stand for a long time because wood has wear and tear. It could not withstand the forces of nature. As wood could not withstand the wear and tear of nature or the effects of the forces of nature, the temples made of that would have been destroyed. Dear children, now let us learn about the evolution of temple architecture that took place in Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, the evolution of temple architecture took place in 5 stages. The Pallava Epic, early Chola Epic, later Chola Epic, Vijayanagara Nayak Epic and modern Epic. I repeat, Pallava, early Chola, later Chola, Vijayanagara or Nayak and modern. And the period of Pallava epic was AD 600 to 850. That of early Chola was 850 to 1100. Later Chola epic was from 1110 to 1350. The Vijayanagara or Nayak epic was from AD 1350 to 1600. And the modern epic was after AD 1600. Now what is an epic? E-P-O-C-H, epic. Epic is an extended period of time characterized by a distinctive development or by a memorable series of events. Now let us learn about the Pallava epic. The Pallava epic witnessed a transition from rock cut to freestanding temples. So there was a transition from rock cut, the temples made from the rock, and from that the change was there to freestanding independent temples. Rock cut temples were initially built by carving a rock to the required design, and then rocks were cut to build temples. So there was on the rock, the temple designs were carved and then it was cut. The Pallava king Mahendravarman was a pioneer in rock cut architecture. So you can see the Pallava king Mahendravarman, he was a pioneer. Pioneer is a path maker or the first one. in the rock cut architecture. In the construction of rock cut temple are Pallava king Mahendra Varman, Mahendravarman. Mahendra Varman was a pioneer. And the Mandagapattu temple was the first rock cut temple built by Mahendra Varman. Mandagapattu, Mandagapattu, Mandagapattu temple was the first rock cut temple which was built by the king Mahendra Varman. The rock cut cave structure has two pillars in the front that hold it. So that rock cut temple has got two pillars in the front, and that will be holding the temple together. The picture shows the rock cut cave temple at Mandagapattu. The Mandagapattu cave temple, which is one of the oldest cave temple or the first cave temple in Tamilnadu, is located in the Villupuram district. It is built using the principles of Shilpa Shastra and ancient science of arts and sculpture. There is an interesting aspect about the temple. There is an inscription on the front pillar of the cave. And it is in Pallava Grantha script, and it says that the temple was built for the Hindu trinity Lord Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, and is built with no use of wood, metal, brick or timber. Dear children, all the cave temples have simple sanctum cut on the rear side of the wall with a frontage projecting on mandapa, that is a pavilion. So they have a sanctum, simple sanctum, which is cut on the rear side of the wall. On either side are two Dwara Palace or gatekeepers, Dwara-Palace, Dwara Palace or gatekeepers. This cave architecture reached its decadent phase after AD 700 and gave way to the large sculptural temples, probably because the structural temples provided a wider scope to the sculptor to use his skill. Decadent, D-E-C-A-D-E-N-T, decadent is a state of decline. So the rock cut temple architecture or cave temple architecture had its declination or declining phase after AD 700 because they were to build larger temples which was very structural, and this structural provided a greater scope for the sculptor, for the person who is sculpting it, to use his skill. He could use his skill in an elaborate way in a structural temples. Dear children, the Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram, also called as the Seven Pagodas, was built by the Pallava king Narasimhavarman II. Dear children, pagoda, P-A-G-O-D-A, pagoda is an ancient or a Hindu or a Buddhist temple in the form of multi-tiered tower. And it is called as Seven Pagodas because of a myth that, or the legend that 6 other temples once stood with this temple. So who built the Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram? It was built by Pallava king Narasimhavarman II, and it is called as Seven Pagodas. It is the oldest structural temple in South India. You can find the oldest structural temple in South India as the Rock Temple or Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram. Dear children, the structural temples were built using blocks of rock instead of whole block as earlier. In cave temples, they were using the whole rock, but here in the case of structural temples, they were using blocks of rock instead of the whole block. The Narasimhavarman II, also known as Rajasimha, built the Kanchi Kailasanatha temple. He is the one who built the Kanchi Kailasanatha temple. It was Narasimhavarman II. Dear children, what you see on the picture is the Kanchi Kailasanatha temple, which is the oldest structural temple in Kanchipuram. It is a Hindu temple in the Dravidian architecture style dedicated to Lord Shiva. Kailasanatha temple, meaning Lord of the Cosmic Mountain, is built in the tradition of Smartha worship of Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, Surya, Ganapati and Kartikeya. Mahendravarman III, his son of Raja Narsimhavarman or Rajasimha, completed the front facade and Gopuram. The Kailasanatha temple became a trendsetter for other similar temples in South India. The temple was a safe sanctuary for the rulers of the kingdom during war. A secret tunnel built by the kings was used as an escape route and is still visible. You can also find the Vaikunta Perumal temple at the Kanchipuram. It is dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. It is one among the 108 Divya Desam dedicated to Vishnu, who is worshipped as Vaikuntanathan or Lord Paramapradhanathan and his consort Lakshmi as Vaikundavalli. Constructed in the Dravidian style of architecture, the temple is glorified in the Divya Prabandha, the earlier medieval Tamil canon of the Alvar saints from the 6th to 19th century. Dear children, the Vaikunta Perumal temple at Kanchipuram was built by Nandivarman II. Mahabalipuram or Mamallapuram is built of cut stones rather than carved out of caves. It has two shrines, one dedicated to Shiva and the other to Vishnu. The Tamil Dravida tradition is exemplified by rock-cut monuments such as Pancha Pandava Rathas, namely Draupadi Ratha, Dharmaraja Ratha, Bhima Ratha, Arjuna Ratha, Nagula Sahadeva Ratha. Dear children, the outer walls of the Rathas, especially of Arjuna, Bhima and Dharmaraja, are decorated with niches and motifs. Dear children, what you see is the layout of a temple in Dravidian style. Indian temple architecture can be broadly divided into two. They are the Nagara or the North Indian tradition and the Dravidian or the South Indian style of architecture. Both the Nagara and Dravidian temple consist of a main shrine or Vimana which houses the inner sanctum known as a Garbhagriha or the womb chamber, topped by a pyramidal tower known as Shikhara. Dravidian temples are typically enclosed within an outer wall with a large gateway tower known as Gopura. The development of early Indian architecture demonstrates a progression from structures of wood and timber to cave shrines, rock-cut structures and eventually freestanding temples constructed out of mortar and stone. Dear children, the outer walls of the Rathas, especially of Arjuna, Bhima and Dharmaraja, are decorated with niches and motifs. Niches, niches are recesses or small spaces in between, and motifs are a recurring fragment or a pattern that appears, that is called as a motif. So you can find, children, on the outer walls of the Rathas, you can find they are decorated with niches and motifs. There are small gaps in between or spaces, and they are having repeated patterns. The niches have the sculptures of gods, goddesses, monarchs and scenes from mythology. You can find the niches, the decorations or the blank spaces have the sculptures of god and goddesses, kings and scenes from mythology. The Arjuna's pennants carved on the face of a granite boulder. Boulder. Boulder is a fragment of a big size rock which is difficult for a person to move. So it is made up of single stone and it is of granite. It is a magnificent relief measuring approximately 100 feet long by 45 feet high. Dear children, what you see on the picture is that of the Arjuna's pennants or the descent of the Ganges. It is measuring 96 by 43 feet. And it's a giant open air rock relief carved on two monolithic rock boulders. The legend depicted in the relief is the story of the descent of the sacred Ganges to earth from the heavens led by Bhagirath. The water of the Ganges are believed to possess supernatural powers. This was created to celebrate the victory of Narasimhavarman over Chalukya king Pulikesin II. The place now known as Mamallapuram was earlier known by the epithet given to the king Narasimhavarman of the Pallava dynasty as Mamallan or the great wrestler or great warrior. Dear children, the Mamallapuram monuments and temples, including the Shore Temple complex, were notified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1984. So the monument of Mamallapuram and the temples, including the Shore Temple, is notified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1984. Before we wind up the session, let us have a recap of what we learned in this unit. In this session, we discussed about the Pallava epoch. We saw how the Pallava epoch witnessed a transition from rock cut to freestanding temples. And Pallava king Mahendra Varman was a pioneer in rock cut architecture. The first rock cut building built by him was at Mandagapattu. Pallava king Narasimhavarman II built the Shore temples at Mahabalipuram, also known as the 7 Pagodas. It is the oldest structural temple in South India. Narasimhavarman II, also known as Rajasimha, built the Kanchi Kailasanatha temple. The Vaikunta Perumal temple at Kanchipuram was built by Nandivarman II. The Tamil Dravidian tradition is exemplified by rock cut monuments such as the Pancha Pandava Rathas, Draupadi Ratha, Dharmaraja Ratha, Bhima Ratha, Arjuna Ratha and Nagula Sahadeva Ratha. Arjuna's pennants carved on the face of a granite boulder is a magnificent relief measuring approximately 100 feet by 45 feet. The Mamallapuram monuments and the temples are notified as World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Dears, in the next session we will discuss about the Pandya temples in the Pallava epoch. Now it's worksheet time. Worksheet number 1. Roman number 1, fill in the blanks. Dash is the oldest structural temple in South India. Dash is the oldest structural temple in South India. Question number 2. Dash year were the Mamallapuram monuments and temples notified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Dash year were the Mamallapuram monuments and temples notified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Question number 3. Dash was the first rock cut cave temple built by the Pallava king Mahendra Varman. Dash was the first rock cut cave temple built by the Pallava king Mahendra Varman. Roman number 2, answer the following. Write a note on Pancha Pandava Rathas. Write a note on Pancha Pandava Rathas. It's time to wind up today's session, dear children. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Samacheer Kalvi Guide. Thank you. Stay blessed.